What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. In the midst of global chatter over Russia-Ukrainian peace talks and shifting alliances, one seemingly minor change has flown almost literally under the radar. It definitely completely bypassed the Russian media, and after watching this video you will clearly see why. While many eyes remained fixed on high-profile negotiations and grand declarations, a quiet maneuver on the American side signals a potentially transformative shift in the US foreign policy. At Russia's request, and this is a very important detail right here, Keith Kellogg, once the formidable special envoy for both Ukraine and Russia, the United States Lieutenant General, has been quietly reassigned as the envoy solely for Ukraine. Just like this. The reins have been passed to Steve Witkoff, the man long known for his business mindset and a knack for striking unconventional deals. Sounds a little like somebody else, a little bit familiar, right?
Epic, transformational, those are the sorts of adjectives that I use about this call.
To the untrained observer, swapping one envoy for another might seem like mere bureaucratic reshuffling. But scratch the surface, and you find a deliberate recalibration of strategy that could have far-reaching implications for the peace process. Unfortunately, more in Putin's favor. So no wonder, even though this rotation happened several weeks ago, and some of you probably even heard about it, it was once again the tireless work of the Russian propaganda, which also most likely influenced in one way or another the Western media, that this entire story, well, as a result, has not received its deserved publicity. Because when we started to dig deeper into the story, this is when we were like, wait a minute, how did it even happen and why nobody was upset at all? Because honestly, it feels like there is a trace of Putin's decision in Keith Kellogg's removal. Was he afraid of him? Was he intimidated by him? We will know soon enough. So today, let's peel back the layers of this seemingly unimportant change. We'll trace the career of Kellogg, a decorated military general whose credentials once inspired confidence, and then contrast him with Witkoff, a maverick negotiator whose unorthodox approach appeals tailor-made for today's volatile landscape. Beyond the personalities themselves, this switch, seemingly forced by the Russian side, hints at the internal ideological struggle within the US political elite itself. A battle between an old guard mindset anchored in traditional power projection and a new vision that emphasizes deal-making and a recalibration of American interests abroad. Keith Kellogg's journey is the stuff of military legends. A saga that has intertwined courage, decorated service, and unwavering patriotism. For over 3 decades, Kellogg earned his stripes in a variety of conflicts, from the dense jungles of Vietnam to the complicated theaters of Panama and the blazing deserts of the Gulf War. A man forged in the fire of combat, he carried a major weight of responsibility when the unthinkable happened during the 9/11. He was commanding operations from an underground bunker at the Raven Rock Mountain Complex. Decorated with the Silver Star, Bronze Star, Legion of Merit, and a host of other awards, Kellogg's record is as impeccable as it is intimidating, which became the first concerning sign for the regime of Putin, which basically means to let him negotiate with nowhere near close in status Russian representatives. Yet, behind the veneer of valor lies a career marked by unexpected pivot. After hanging up his uniform in 2003, Kellogg traded the battlefield for boardrooms in the defense and IT sectors. Despite his extensive military background, few could have predicted his future as a key architect in America's diplomatic chess game. It was during President Trump's first campaign that Kellogg's unassuming reputation transformed into a potent symbol of traditional American strength.
I lived service. I understand sacrifice. I know leadership. Over the past 3.5 years, I have witnessed every major foreign policy and national security decision by the President.
In a move that startled political insiders, the president elevated him from relative obscurity to a role as his special envoy, a trusted, though unconventional foreign policy advisor. Despite his robust credentials, Kellogg's involvement as the envoy for both Ukraine and Russia was fraught with awkward silences and missed opportunities. His reluctance to fully engage in high-level negotiations left many wondering whether his military pedigree could translate into the subtle art of diplomacy. His mindset was much closer to the previous administration, which implied that no negotiations are possible with the terrorists. And Russia was simply not prepared to deal with such politically strong-willed person. The regime of Putin previously used various tactics to intimidate in order to force their opponents to do what's best for Russia. But such things simply will not work with Keith Kellogg. So there are some concerns and assumptions that the slow and meticulous work of replacing Kellogg as Russian-Ukrainian envoy was initiated by the Russian side, if not Putin himself. After all, the FSB's reach spreads not just across the biggest country in the world. It can as easily reach distant places and influence foreign minds. Fast forward to these days, Keith Kellogg was replaced by Steve Witkoff. From American perspective, Kellogg's replacement signals not just a personal demotion, but the fading influence of a doctrine rooted in the belief that sheer military might can dictate global outcomes. What followed is the new type of envoy, one whose background in deal-making and negotiation may be better suited to today's intricate web of alliances and conflicts. If Kellogg embodied the archetype of the battle-hardened warrior, then Steve Witkoff represents an entirely different breed of negotiator. One whose origins lie not in the heat of combat, but in the fast-paced corridors of real estate and high-stakes business deals. Witkoff's story begins long before his entrance into the murky arena of international diplomacy. His long-standing relationship with President Donald Trump stretches back nearly 4 decades, a friendship cemented by shared lunches in Delhi aisles and countless rounds of golf. Reportedly, what started it all is when Witkoff met Trump trying to buy a Swiss cheese and ham sandwich, but couldn't pay for it, because he forgot his cash at home. This is when Steve offered to pay for the sandwich, and well, the rest is history. Unlike the stalwart general whose reputation rests on valor and medals, Witkoff's credentials are etched in the art of deal-making. Known as a talented negotiator with an instinct for reading people and situations, he carved out a reputation as someone who could navigate the labyrinth world of high finance and real estate with ease. When the spotlight of politics shifted to the Trump's administration, Witkoff's unique skill quickly caught the president's attention. Tasked initially with handling thorny issues in the Middle East, a region notorious for the protracted conflicts and complex power plays, Witkoff proved that his unconventional approach was precisely what was needed to break these stalemates. Or at least to Trump's perspective, who at that time already revered him and considered him one of the best friends. In a move that many deemed audacious, Witkoff took on the role of mediating a hostage negotiations and even managed to put pressure on high-ranking officials in Israel to adjust their positions. His brand of diplomacy was raw, direct, and refreshingly unpolished, a stark departure from the carefully scripted statements of career diplomats. Witkoff's success in navigating the delicate balance between adversaries while simultaneously courting the favor of figures like Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, underscored his ability to get things done where others failed. It was not long before the same negotiating technique that diffused tensions in the Middle East was seen as the valuable asset in dealing with Russia. Unlike Kellogg, whose approach was steeped in the traditions of military honor and nationalistic fervor, Witkoff embraced a different approach, one that prioritized tangible results over grandstanding rhetoric. And this also involves being more cooperative with both sides if it helps to strike a deal faster. Exactly the type of person the regime of Putin wanted to resume the talks between Russia and Ukraine after a couple of years of complete silence. If you are still not sure whether Witkoff is more warm towards Putin, Just take a look at this video where he describes with great passion how wonderful and generous Putin sent Trump his portrait, which Putin personally used during his prayers for Trump's health, especially after that near-miss event that happened in Pennsylvania in July 2024.
Moment and told me a story, Tucker, about how when the president was shot, he went to his local church and met with his priest and prayed for the president, not because he was the president of he could become the president of the United States, but because he had a friendship with him and he was praying for his friend. It was, I mean, can you imagine sitting there and listening to these kind of conversations? And I came home and delivered that message to our president and delivered the painting, and he was clearly touched by it. So this is the kind of connection that we've been able to reestablish through, by the way, a simple word called communication.
Does this look like a person who will be more willing to give Russia something in favor of peace? Now compare him to battle-hardened Keith Kellogg, who was an extremely pro-Ukrainian. And suddenly, the idea that Russia played its role in this replacement, well, now it kind of makes sense, right? Let's now also talk about what does this switch means to the American international relations, at least from the perspective of Trump's administration. At first glance, swapping one envoy for another might seem like a routine reshuffling of personnel. However, beneath the surface, this change is a subtle indicator of a much deeper realignment in American foreign policy. The decision to confine Keith Kellogg's role solely to Ukraine while entrusting negotiations with Russia to Steve Witkoff is not merely administrative. It is a clear sign that the old paradigms are being reevaluated and in some cases discarded. The era of relying on combat experienced generals to assert dominance in international affairs appears to be giving way for a new strategy, one that values nuanced negotiations and the ability to adapt to rapidly changing global dynamics. In today's geopolitical theater, where alliances are fluid and the stakes are astronomical, traditional methods of military posturing often fall short. Witkoff's appointment, with his background in making high-pressure deals and his willingness to engage directly with very controversial figures, points to recognition that diplomacy is evolving and that current US administration is willing to do unorthodox things just for the sake of striking a deal and moving on. This is not just about swapping faces, it's about, for better or worse, recalibrating America's entire approach to exerting influence abroad. For too long, the doctrine of power through force and unwavering military commitment held sway. Now, the emphasis is shifting towards securing tangible, immediate outcomes, even if that means engaging in unconventional tactics or compromising on long-held principles. The envoy swap is emblematic of a broader trend, where pragmatism trumps ideology. See what we did there? And the art of negotiation is elevated above the clamor of traditional power displays. It is a move that reflects an understanding that the modern world demands flexibility and the ability to forge alliances based on mutual benefit rather than unilateral dominance. Or at least, once again, this is what the Trump administration believes in and wants us to see. As the peace processes in Eastern Europe continue to teeter on the edge of uncertainty, this quiet but deliberate change in the US diplomatic playbook could well be the beginning of a new era of American diplomacy. With one more question, however. Was this change sponsored by Putin? The envoy swap is not merely a tactical decision in the realm of international diplomacy. It is also a mirror reflecting the deep ideological fissures within the Republican camp. For decades, the Republicans championed a vision of America as the world's most influential nation. A nation whose power was measured by its military might and its unwavering commitment to defending its interests through force. Figures like Keith Kellogg, with their storied careers and traditional approach, embodied, obviously, these ideas. Yet, as the political winds shift and the new America First doctrine gains momentum, A growing faction within the party has begun to question the wisdom of pouring resources into global entanglements that yield uncertain returns. Steve Witkoff's rise to prominence is essential of this internal divide. Unlike Kellogg, who represents the old guard with his deep roots in military tradition and a belief in the unquestionable value of American might, Witkoff's approach is built on pragmatism and an acute sensitivity to the changing geopolitical landscape. His relative success in maneuvering through the labyrinth of the Middle East negotiations, coupled with his ability for striking deals in unexpected quarters, has positioned him as the preferred choice for a party increasingly disillusioned with the high cost of traditional foreign policy. Critics of the old approach argue that relentless military investment and unwavering commitments to overseas allies have become an unfillable void, draining American resources and entangling the nation in conflicts with no clear endgame. To them, the envoy swap is not merely a personal decision. It is a statement that America's priorities are shifting. The new generation of Republican strategists, emboldened by a more isolationist and economically driven vision, sees every dollar spent on foreign policy as one that could have been better allocated at home. In this light, the replacement of Kellogg with Witkoff can be viewed as a microcosm of the broader transformation within the party, a pivot away from the age-old strategy of power projections and toward a model that prioritizes striking deals that favor America, even if it means ignoring some of its allies' requests for helps. As the divide deepens, the implications extend far beyond the corridors of Washington. The way America conducts its diplomacy, negotiates with adversaries, and even allocates its military resources may be forever altered by this internal struggle between tradition and transformation. For this reason, the reshuffle is an extremely polarizing event that can turn supporters against each other and make opponents to start listening to each other once again. Some say that talks with Russia should have never resumed for as long as Putin is in power. That was Kellogg's approach. But for how long more will Putin rule? 5, 10, 15, 20 years? Could it be more? Will Ukraine, Europe and the US at this point be able to sustain several decades of conflict? That is a very controversial question. The others say that the talks should have come way sooner. According to them, it is impossible to change Putin's mind, and the best thing that can be done is to get Ukraine as good deal as possible. But that means resuming the talks with the invader. There is, as you can see, no right or wrong choice here. You have to compromise something somewhere, and we are curious to hear what you guys think. Should have the world continued ignoring Putin, hoping the war will take an unexpected turn in Ukrainian favor at some point in the future? Or should the world clench its fists and just bite the tongue and talk with the most hated man on earth in favor of saving hundreds of thousands of lives? That is a very complicated dilemma. Well, there you have it, guys. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. Thanks so much for watching. See you tomorrow.
We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell, their twisted words and feeble claims on us all.